In a bustling African city, two young men, Steve and Fred, were best friends, but their lives couldn't have been more different. Steve was born with a golden spoon in his mouth. His father, Mr. Otieno, was a successful businessman who owned massive investments in oil, real estate, and hotels. Steve lived in a mansion with servants, bodyguards, and private jets. He was always surrounded by luxury, but there was one thing Steve longed for: freedom. He wanted to be like everyone else, free to eat whatever he wanted, walk wherever he wanted, and live without the constant shadow of his father's expectations. Steve had no interest in inheriting his father's wealth. He dreamt of being independent, of living a simple life away from the pressure of his father's empire. Fred, on the other hand, came from humble beginnings. His father was a farmer who struggled to make ends meet. Fred worked hard at a local market, selling vegetables to help his family. Though he loved his parents dearly, Fred couldn't help but envy the life that Steve lived. He watched Steve eat in fancy restaurants, travel the world without worry, and never have to think about money. He dreamed of a life where he had bodyguards, expensive clothes, and the power to get whatever woman he wanted. He wanted the life Steve had so badly that he often fantasized about it. One hot afternoon, as the two friends sat under the shade of a large tree, they began talking about their lives. Steve sighed heavily, and Fred noticed. "What's wrong?" Fred asked. "I'm tired of this life," Steve replied. "I want to live like normal people, no bodyguards, no fancy cars. I just want to be free." Fred raised an eyebrow. "You want my life?" "No." Steve laughed. "I mean, your life is hard, but at least you're free. You do what you want, when you want. You don't have to answer to anyone. I wish I could have that." Fred stared at Steve for a moment, a light bulb going off in his mind. "You know, we could switch lives. For just a week. You get to live like me, and I'll live like you. We'll see if the grass is really greener on the other side." Steve hesitated. "Are you sure about this?" Fred nodded. "Let's do it. A week. We'll see what happens." And so, the two friends decided to switch lives for a week, thinking they would have it all figured out by the end. The next morning, Steve woke up in Fred's small room, surrounded by the smell of the market and the sound of roosters crowing. His clothes were simple, and there were no servants waiting on him. He had to walk to the market, where he spent hours under the hot sun, carrying heavy baskets of vegetables. Steve was used to air-conditioned cars, but now he had to deal with the sweat running down his back as he walked. At lunch, Steve sat with Fred's family in their small home, eating plain rice and beans. It was nothing like the gourmet meals he was used to, and he found himself longing for the taste of his favorite restaurant steak. But what surprised him the most was the warmth and love in Fred's home. The conversations were simple but filled with care, and Fred's mother constantly asked how he was feeling. Steve had never experienced such genuine love and attention. By the third day, Steve realized that the freedom he longed for was not as easy as he had imagined. The work was tiring, the money was not easy to come by, and he missed the comfort of his mansion. His legs ached from walking, and the heat was unbearable. But what hurt him more was seeing Fred's family struggle every day, trying to make ends meet. Steve had always taken his wealth for granted, but now, he understood the weight of it. On the other side of the city, Fred woke up in Steve's luxurious mansion, surrounded by expensive furniture and a bed that was so soft, it felt like he was sleeping on clouds. He had breakfast served to him by a maid, and his clothes were tailored to perfection. Fred couldn't believe his eyes when he looked at the private jet waiting for him in the driveway. This was the life he had always dreamed of. For the first few days, Fred enjoyed the attention. He had bodyguards following him everywhere, and people treated him with respect. He could eat in the best restaurants and wear the finest clothes. Women surrounded him, all eager for his attention. He thought he had it all. But soon, the loneliness began to set in. The house was massive, but it felt empty. Fred had no real friends. Steve's friends were busy with their own lives, and Fred felt like an outsider in their world. He missed the closeness he had with his family and the warmth of being part of a small, loving community. The bodyguards, while protecting him, made him feel like a prisoner. He realized that with all the wealth and power, he didn't have the freedom Steve had once yearned for. One evening, as Fred sat alone in Steve's mansion, staring out at the city below, he began to understand the truth. The life he thought he wanted was not as perfect as he had imagined. After a week, the two friends met again at the same tree where they had made the decision. They looked at each other, both with a sense of regret in their eyes. "I didn't know it was like this," Steve said. "The work, the struggle, the heat. It's hard. But I think I understand now that what I had wasn't so bad. I miss my family, and I miss the simplicity of their love." Fred nodded, his eyes heavy with emotion. "And I miss the freedom of living a simple life. The mansion, the power, it was all too much. It felt like a prison. I thought I wanted all that, but now I see, it wasn't what I needed. I just wanted to feel connected, to feel real." Both of them were quiet for a moment, reflecting on their experiences. They realized that they had both been chasing something they didn't fully understand. Steve had been running from the life his father built for him, and Fred had been running towards something he thought would make him happy. But in the end, they had both learned a valuable lesson. It's not the riches or the freedom that bring happiness, but the love, the connections, and the choices we make along the way. They agreed that they would go back to their own lives, but with a new understanding of what truly mattered. And so, Steve returned to his family's mansion, not with the same desire to escape, but with a newfound appreciation for the love and care that came with his wealth. Fred went back to his family, not with bitterness, but with a deeper sense of gratitude for the simple life he had always known. The two friends learned that sometimes, what we think we want isn't what we truly need. And in the end, happiness doesn't come from wealth or freedom, but from the relationships we build and the choices we make. And that's how Steve and Fred learned to cherish the lives they had, for each life has its own unique challenges and blessings. Moral of the story: be careful what you wish for you may find that the life you think you want isn't as perfect as you imagined. True happiness lies in appreciating what you already have and finding peace in your own path. Please don't forget to subscribe, like and share this video.